I made this simple pot stand about 6 years ago, just from oak dowels, but for quite a while now, I've wanted to remake it with a much improved design, and I finally got around to doing that. I drew up my leg design in Lightburn and cut out a template from 6mm MDF using the laser. The new stand was basically the same as the old, with 4 legs joined together with a cross brace assembly. I traced my template onto some pine boards, but I only had 2 of these boards, so I nested the templates together to get the best yield. But that made it difficult to cut down the middle of the 2 with my large bandsaw, so I had to finish it off with the small one. I then ran the pieces through the thicknesser, including the board for the cross pieces, to get everything to the same thickness. I attached the templates to the leg blanks and cut them to final shape on the router table using a flush trim bit. This is a double bearing bit, so I can flip my piece over without changing the template to account for grain direction. Next, I trim the legs to final width, truing up that mating surface where the cross pieces will be attached. I also used the template to mark my cross-cut fence so I could trim each end of the 4 legs to final height and parallel to each other. Okay, so I think now's a good time to take a pause in this build and talk about order of operation. So I've gone ahead and I've finished these pieces to their final shape. Now what I have to do next is put a cross piece between two legs, and I've got two of those, so I end up with basically two frames with a cross piece. And what will happen after that is they'll get put together with a half lap to make a four-legged stand. But because I've finished this to the exact dimension, when I go to cut this piece of wood to join in there, I have to get that exactly right. No room for error if it moves up or down, because this is the finished shape. Now, what I should have done, I should have left them rough cut from the bandsaw, only flattened off this surface here, joined the cross piece, and then cut the final shape. So the transition between the leg and the rail, if you want to call it that, would be perfect. It's a bit late for that now, so we'll just see how we go. It's not impossible to do it this way, it's just going to make it harder for myself, so I think that's how I'll do it next time. The only issue I see with that method though is because these two rails are going to be half lapped together, I'm going to cut the half lap in the rail before it's joined to the leg, because it just makes it easier to put it on either the router table or the table saw, if you're going to do it by machine. I think if you're going to do this by hand, then it's not a problem. But if you're going to do this by machine, you want to cut that half lap, like I said, before you join it to this. So then you might get an alignment issue with just rough joining the rail to the leg and then finalizing the shape, because you've got to watch the height of that half lap. And when you put these two sections together, there might be a misalignment. I don't know how much of a problem that would be. You could accurately mark the center of this and the center of the rail and then, join them up. So there's a few different ways of doing it. Like they say, there's always more than one way to do woodworking. But let me know in the comments, or let everyone else know in the comments how you would do it if you would do anything differently. The only pieces left to cut were the two cross pieces that would join the legs together. I took a measurement directly off the legs and set the fence on my saw to a fraction wider than that, so I could use a hand plane to bring them down to a perfect fit. I used the actual pot this stand was being made for to decide on the gap I wanted between the stand and the pot, so I could cut the cross pieces to final length. I preferred the smaller gap. I then cut them to size and used a block plane to match their width to the legs before working on the joinery. The preferred joinery for the stand was dowels using the Dowel Max because it's so precise, and two 8mm dowels at every joint would make the stand very strong. To cut the half flaps on each centerpiece, I first marked where the cuts should be made to avoid any confusion, because my layout lines were drawn on the opposite face of the cut, only so I could line them up easily with the kerf in my mini crosscut sled, which I used to cut these. I set the depth of the cut on the saw and then used the test piece to confirm it before cutting the actual pieces. And you can see here how I'm using my layout lines to line up with the kerf of the crosscut sled. I'm using my second table saw for these cuts because it's the only one I have a flat grind blade for. I cut the half flaps slightly shy of the layout lines so I could creep up to a perfect fit. Time for glue up, and this would have to be one of the easier glue ups I've done. Just 2 clamps to keep the pieces flat and level, and 1 clamp to close the joints. I like it. After the glue had dried, I sanded the leg sections to remove any excess glue and make sure the joints were perfectly flat and smooth. And then a very small chamfer to break the sharp edges. I also drilled and countersunk a screw hole for the half flap joint. I really struggled with what finish to use on the stand. I didn't like any of these stains I had in the shop. and even tried tinting some clear poly. I just knew that I wanted the colour of the stand to be darker. I used this particular stain to darken the poly because it was a water-based one. It wasn't looking promising. So I've got a few more test results here. This one is my experiment with the coloured clear poly, and it's got a wax finish over the top of it. Not real happy with it. I don't know how much it's going to show up on video, but it has a purple tone to it, so I don't like that at all. This one here, kind of liking that. That's a oil-based cedar stain. I first put it on here, and that's horrible because it's just so blotchy. But here, this is with sanding sealer. I'm going to go with this method. I applied a coat of sanding sealer to the two halves of the stand, and once it had dried, I sanded it smooth with 240 grit sandpaper. I then applied the stain and wasn't expecting it to be so thin and runny. I think the sanding sealer didn't help either because it stopped the stain from penetrating into the timber, as you'll see in the huge colour difference when I wipe off the excess stain. Time for final glue up, which was one joint and one screw. It doesn't get much easier than that. I then finished off the stand with a couple of coats of spray can clear. Well, here's the finished stand, and I'm really happy with it. I'm happy with the design and the shape. I'm not 100% sold on the finish. I don't really like stained pine. I don't think it ever looks good, but I used the pine because it's what I had at the time. And in the beginning, this plant stand was an experiment. It's not a prototype because I knew I wanted this shape, but it was an experiment just to see how it would work out, the dimensions and things like that. So that's why it is the way it is, but I will still use it in the house. But as I said, the design is what I really like about it. And compared to the original, I think there's a big difference. At the time that I made this, many years ago, I thought it was great. But as you can see, it's really basic. I kind of got tired of this design pretty quickly. And in my mind, for a very long time, I knew I wanted to do one that was this shape. Just adding tapers and curves to a design really lifts it, I think. And what I like the most about this one is that this angle here matches the pot that's going to sit in the stand. So this can be custom made to any pot that you want to put in the stand. So I think that's what I like about it the most. This one will be replacing this one. We've got a few others of these in the house, and I'll probably make more of these. So yeah, happy with that. Hope you enjoyed the video, and we'll see you in the next one.